Man, it was like heavy metal trash cans singing along the groovy interstices of some hepcat webman. Screaming through the purple sirens of the city, awake at 4:30 a.m., moonlit night blanketing the yard, dogs howling in the trees, and I was spinning through sights, plowing through pages, growling through the gifts, my eyes like tiny red raisins, blotchy, wrinkled corneas, flat, featureless, hyper-textual boneyards of unmeaning, the waves unheard and the flat files flushed at the mercy of the hellion webmaster of Freddy's cow insurance homepage. When my browser crashed through some weirdo mysterioso packet barrier man, and there I was on this cool page, a sweet, delirious, munificent page, tagged and titled before and after, tables nested deep and deeper in the collective subconscious of the killer site and its creators, seeking enlightenment in dynamic HTML, seduced by the object model of 1,000 nights of ecstasy, besmooched by Scheherazade, besought by the cyber cam in the valley of the shadow of the moon of Mars. And there it was, just now visible as it blasted through a cut-through black, uncover down, split vertical out transition. Filters screaming, letters a mile high. Flames mounting in my medulla oblongata, the words flooded my brain, man. Worldwide live, the web the way you want it.
Man, that was heavy. But dig this. Our opening concept may be borrowing from the old, but the content of today's show is like swinging new. Welcome to Worldwide Live, the web the way you want it. Get ready to dig into dynamic HTML and learn how to build active channels for the desktop. It's Internet Explorer 4.0. It's hot, it's happening. And here to kick things off is one of the hippest cats you'll ever see, Mr. Leo Artelejo. Leo, man, the floor is yours.
Welcome to Worldwide Live, the web the way you want it. You are sitting in a local community of site authors, web developers, and web designers, but more importantly, you are part of a global community of people who have gathered together to learn about Internet Explorer 4.0. What we've tried to do with this event is make it a really high-impact training event. We got together as a group when we started this event, and we started thinking about what we wanted to do with Worldwide Live. And our real focus is that you leave the theaters today with the knowledge, with an understanding of the technologies that we've built into IE4 so that you can make a difference to the content on your site. We don't want you to be able to go home and only run the samples or fire up the sexy web pages that we've built for you on your CD. We want you to have the understanding and the technical knowledge that you need to change the content on your site. My name is Leo Artelejo. I am the producer of Worldwide Live. When I lose the Superman cape and tights, I'm a technical evangelist in the developer relations group at Microsoft. And my group's committed to bringing you the development information you need to author the next generation web pages and web applications. So when you hear Worldwide Live in the future, know that it's a training event. Know that it's not a product pitch, it's about technical training. That's what Worldwide Live is about. So we've done 2 of these before. The first was focused on Windows 95. The second was focused on activating the client and the server, IE3 IIS. That was last July. And this is the 3rd Worldwide Live, the return of Worldwide Live, the web the way you want it. And today we'll be focused completely on IE4, specifically dynamic HTML and the object model therein, and channel definition format, CDF. What you should have got by now is this list of speakers. Hopefully it's localized for your time zone. If it's not, I'm going to walk through sort of the course of the day with you. We'll be spending the first hour talking about dynamic HTML. We'll be doing an IE4 overview demo first to get everybody on the same page with the product. Then Michael will come out and talk about dynamic HTML and the object model. We'll follow that with the design segment. Then you get your 20-minute break, your coveted 20-minute break. We want you to go check your email, check your Vmail, grab a quick bite to eat, and then come right back because we're going to hit the ground running with channels and writing CDF files. Costetta will be out to fill us in there. We'll build an active desktop item. We'll talk about the multimedia in IE4. Then Joe will demo Memphis, Windows 98. And then Bill will come out, hit the home run, tell you where we're taking all of this in Windows in the years to come. Also, you should have by now gotten your pair of CDs. On this CD is IE4, the preview version, along with the Internet SDK. Now, I'm going to say that again. The Internet SDK is your first stop for development resource information. Check it out. It's a really valuable resource. It's on this CD. Here's the Worldwide Live CD that we worked really hard on. On it, you'll find all the samples and all the demos that you'll see today. So don't worry about scribbling down notes or trying to copy down what you see in the editor there. You've got it on your CD. As well, you'll find authoring tools by Pictorius, Expertelligence, Userland. You'll find design time controls. You'll find a great group of samples, docs, and overviews that we call the Jumpstart CD. That's a bunch of content that we've put together with the content partners that we've been working with over the last 6 months. People like Sony, Rolling Stone, Microgroove, Wired. You'll see a lot of the customer testimonials today that we've put together, and they've been working with that content and the samples that you'll find there. Again, we're really excited about this event. We've put a lot of time into picking the speakers and tailoring the content. I hope that you'll be satisfied with the amount of technical content. We're going to spend a lot of time in editors. Get used to seeing a lot of code and a lot of text, because that's what today is built around. We've got the best speakers in the company coming out. These are the guys that stay up late nights eating Thai food and writing specs that define the technology in IE4. Those are the people that are talking to you today. They're the program managers from the Internet Explorer team. So they're the creators of the technology, and you're hearing it right from their mouth, the whys and wheres of that technology. So I want you to sit back, enjoy yourself. There's a lot to learn, a lot to absorb, and I hope you have a really good time. We thank you for being part of Worldwide Live, and it is my pleasure to introduce you to your host, one of the hippest cats at Microsoft, Mr. Hepcat, Robert Hess.
Good morning, good afternoon, or I guess in some cases out there, good evening. As Leo said, today is going to spend an awful lot of time talking about the technology involved in Internet Explorer 4.0. I think it's important for everybody to realize there's actually two sides to the browser. There's the sides that the end user sees, all the user interface bits, the icons and the toolbars and stuff like that. But also an extremely important part of IE4 is what's behind the browser, what's behind the HTML, what allows you as web authors to have access to that functionality, the object model, the scripting, the HTML, the tags, the attributes, and all that sort of stuff. An awful lot of thought has gone into IE4 to make sure that IE4 is the best browser for both users and authors. As I said, from the user standpoint, there's an awful lot of importance that's gone into it. And to help you understand what the user is going to see, what the experience on the desktop will be with IE4, is Joe Belfiore to demonstrate IE4 and the user experience.
Hey, Robert.
Hi, Joy.
Good to see you.
Hi, I'm Joe Belfiore, and I'm going to take you on a quick tour through IE4, try to get you a glimpse at all the parts of this product as quickly as I can. One of the things I want to start out with is that IE4 is really a whole lot more than just a web browser. It's a big product, there's a lot to it, and we like to think of it in 4 separate pieces. What I'm going to do is give you a quick look at each of those 4 areas. The first is the web browser, and we think that IE4 is a great web browser for people who want to go out and browse the web. It offers great ways of creating great content, and it's really easy, and it helps you get yourself around the internet. The second thing about IE4 is that it offers a complete communication and collaboration suite of applications, including things like a mail client or a collaboration client, a broadcast client, and so on. The third thing is that it offers webcasting, or delivery of information that you care about, that you need to know about, onto your client machine. And the last thing is that it offers true web integration with your Windows desktop, so that the way you browse your hard disk and the way you use your desktop works very much like the way you use the web. So let's take a quick look, and I'll start taking you through some of these features. First thing I'm going to do is bring up a browser window here, and we'll take a look at IE4. And what do you know? Here I am looking at an ordinary web page. Now, this is actually a web page that contains nothing but HTML. There's no Java applets, no ActiveX controls here. And like you can see as I select the text, this is HTML. And what it actually is an asteroids game. And I promised Mike Wallet, our program manager on Dynamic HTML, that I would not demo this. So I'm not going to demo it. And you can look forward to his talk, because he's going to show you not only how well this works, but how you can create pages just like that. That's the first feature of our browser, Dynamic HTML. What I want to spend time on, though, is the end-user enhancements that make browsing the web better. So the first thing I want to talk about is trying to solve problems for people and helping them get to websites more effectively and more efficiently than they can today. When people want to go to websites, they want to go to sites that they've never been to, or sites in the future. They want to go to sites often that they've been to in the past and want an easy way to get back to, and they want to get to sites that they go to often. So what we've added to IE4 is a new feature called Explorer Bars. And what Explorer Bars are is an area on the left, a pane that works a lot like an HTML frame, that lets people get sites over here and click on items and see them in the right. And what I've done here is I've already done a search on AltaVista for IE4. And you can see here all of the pages that match my search on IE4. There's a page about IE4 and W3C standards, which is not available, such as the internet. And as you can see, I can just mouse my way down through these and click on them and see the pages over here on the right. When I'm done, I can just pop the search thing away. And what this does, it makes it easier for me to do a search, to get results back, and to browse my way through all the contents. And we're going to see this as a running theme. Those are sites in the future. Let's take another example of sites that I want to get to frequently. They're sites that I've been to in the past. So here I have a history button, which brings up a history explorer bar. And it's the same idea. It gives me a list of sites. And in this case, it's sorted by time. So here you can see all the sites that I've been to today. I've been to Seattle Sidewalk. I've been to a bunch of places on Microsoft.com and so on. I can click on Wednesday and see all the sites that I was at yesterday. Yesterday I was visiting waterski.net and this particular page on waterski.net. And you see how the tree automatically collapses and expands itself to show you the different things that I've been looking at different days. It cleans up after itself and makes it easier for people to navigate around. It's interesting. IE3 has had a feature for providing a list of sites that you've always been to, and not a whole lot of people used it because you had to go to this special folder and dig your way through. What we found with Explorer Bars is it really makes it easy for people to be able to get back to sites that they know they visited and can't find again following links on conventional websites. So we've seen that end users really like this feature a lot in IE4. The last Explorer bar I want to show you is the Favorites Explorer bar. When I click on the Favorites button, again, I get a list of sites here, and it works just like a tree. So if I click on folders, they'll expand and contract to show me the items underneath them. And I can click on these to visit all these sites. And they're the same sites that are in my Favorites menu. If I have a lot of screen real estate or want to move from one item to the next, this is a great way to do it. So that's the feature of Explorer Bars, and that gives you an example of how we're making it easier for people to get to sites. We've made searching a lot easier. We've made it easy to get to sites that you've been to in the past. We're making it easy for you to get to sites you go to frequently. The next area I want to talk about in the web browser is customization, and really making it so that users can make the browser work the way they want. People really are passionate about the way they browse the web, and we want to make it possible for you to configure your web browser to work the way you want it. We want to make that easy. So there's a few features that we've done. In IE3, we did some work on the toolbar so that you could do things like take the address bar and move it up here next to the tools. And if you have high resolution, you can get all these things on one row. Well, with IE4, we did the same thing with the menu bar. So now I can take the menu bar space and drag my toolbars up here. And if I want, I can really squish all these things down so as to give maximal area to my content. So in this case, I'm taking up less space than I did even with IE3. Fully customizable using the same user interface that people who've used IE3 are used to. That's one quick example of customization. Another example I want to show is customization of your favorites menu. A lot of people have asked us for the feature of being able to customize the order of things in their favorites menu. People have said that they've been able to do this in Netscape, and they've always wished that they could do it in IE. Well, we're proud to say that with IE4 we've added the feature that you can customize the order of your favorites menu, and we think we've done it in a way that will really make it easy for you and will be intuitive and easy for people to learn. So what we've done here is, as you mouse through the favorites menu, if you decide you want to take something like the dynamic asteroids page and move it to the top, you can just grab it and move it. And it'll go right to the top of your favorites menu. Simple as that. You don't have to go find some menu command and go find some dialog box and manipulate some list. You just manipulate right in the menu. Furthermore, if there's an item in your favorites menu that you're sick of seeing, like maybe this default page that I don't even know what it is, I can just right-click on it and choose delete, and it's gone. All right there in the favorites menu without going to some separate dialog box and so on. Very customizable, very easy for people to work with. The last thing that I want to show with respect to customization is a feature that really lets you focus on content. If you want to really get into your web browsing experience and completely focus on content, like people have tried to cram their toolbars up and turn their status bar off, we decided we'd just give you a really easy way to do it, so we've created full screen mode. You may have seen full screen mode in some of the Office applications, and to enable it, all I need to do is go here to the View menu and choose Full Screen, and you'll see that my browser will pop into full screen mode, total focus on the content, with only the basic toolbar commands available up here. And if I want, I can make this auto hide, or I can turn the menu bar on. Even full screen mode is highly customizable. And when I'm done with that, I can just click on the Close button to put the browser away, or I can click the Restore button to go back to regular mode. So with those features, we really think that we've delivered a great web browser. For end users, it's the best way to get around the web, the smoothest vehicle for doing your browsing. And for authors, as you'll hopefully find out later today, we've created a web browser that lets you create really terrific content. Second thing I want to talk about is communication and collaboration. I'm not going to spend very much time on this. I'll just give you a quick peek at Outlook Express, our email client that's free and comes with IE4. There's a whole lot of new features in Outlook Express. One of the first things you might notice is that it has an Outlook bar here on the left, which makes it fit in better with its other brother, Outlook. So you can customize this by putting whatever links you want on there and so on. Another thing that you'll probably notice pretty quickly is that we have a 3-pane view, so you can see messages here and the message contents down below. And you might notice right away that this is actually HTML that I'm showing you here in Mail as well. So as I click on items in the preview, what you're seeing down here is real live HTML mail. Here's MSNBC today, and here's an example of news.com dispatch. This is actually a message that was sent by Netscape Inbox Direct. So if sites offer the Netscape Inbox Direct feature, you'll be able to receive them with the Outlook Express client and view the full rich HTML mail. Another cool thing about our HTML mail support is that we fully support dynamic HTML here. So in this case, I'm looking at a dynamic HTML mail message, and you can see how, as I click on these links, the HTML content itself changes without having to refresh the whole page. One other thing that I'll add here is that through the webcasting features of IE4, you can go to any site and choose to have its contents emailed to you without the site author having to do anything on the server. It's kind of an open version of Inbox Direct. You, as the end user, can go to the site, choose that you want its contents emailed to you on your schedule, and then they'll just be mailed to you in rich HTML mail. There's one last feature I want to show you here, which is how HTML mail really makes it possible for end users to get more fun and visual excitement in their email. One of the features we've added to Outlook Express is a feature called Stationery, where I can create a new message using and then select one of these HTML templates. So if I create new message using a party template, then I get this HTML message that shows me balloons and has some text. And I can fully edit this HTML mail by selecting and typing or changing the text attributes and so on. That's a quick look at Outlook Express. There is really a whole lot more to it, so I'd encourage you to go play around with it. Everything from import and export wizards to get your mail from Netscape or Eudora into Outlook Express, to pretty much every acronym you can imagine supporting, LDAP, IMAP, and so on. But let me move on. The next thing I want to talk about is the webcasting features of IE4. And what webcasting is about being able to allow the user to specify which kinds of content they want and have them told when there's new content available, or have them notified with actual content being delivered onto their hard disk so they can use it offline. And there's two features in IE4 that address this: subscriptions and channels. So let's take a look at what each of these means. What I'll do is I'm just going to go to Seattle Sidewalk, an ordinary website. I think we have lost our server here. Well, that's kind of a bummer. What I could do here, let me try a different site. OK, here we go. I will subscribe to the asteroid site. What I'm going to do is I'm out here on Microsoft.com. And let's say, for example, that this was a news site. And Every day it has new content on it, and I want to get the updated content delivered to my machine. The site author hasn't done anything special to make the site work for delivery of their content. And so this is a feature that has to be implemented totally within the client. So what I'm going to do to subscribe to the site is go to the Favorites menu, choose Subscriptions, and click on the Subscribe button. I get a dialog box that tells me I'm going to create a website subscription to the name of the site, and it tells me that it's going to notify me when the site content is changed by a change in my icon in the Favorites menu. It's not going to download any content, and it's on an automatic schedule. If I just click OK, which I won't do, I will have created the subscription to that site, and whenever the content is changed, the icon will change in my Favorites menu so I know something new is available. What I want to do, though, is take a little bit more tricky example and actually download website content. Let's imagine that I have a laptop and I ride the train to work every morning and I want to read the daily news from whatever news site I prefer. So I want it downloaded onto my machine during the night so I can read it while offline. In that case, I do the same thing. I go to Favorites, Subscriptions, I choose to subscribe. And in this case, I'm going to customize the default subscription. So I'll click the Customize button, and we get our website subscription wizard. The first question is, do you want to download any pages from this website? In this case, I want to download the top level page and some of the pages linked to it. Then I'll click on Next. It asks me how many levels deep, and I'll choose 2 levels deep. Remember, the site author here hasn't done anything to specify which stuff should get downloaded, so we need to web crawl the content, and I'm going to choose 2 levels deep. Then I'll click Next, and it's going to ask me whether I want to be sent email, the site contents in email. This is the feature I described before. I'll say no and keep going. Next thing, when should the site subscription be updated? And I'll leave it with the default, an auto schedule that happens every day. And finally, does the website require a password? If the site uses basic authentication, I can type in my username and password, and then it can be downloaded without me having to be there to enter that stuff. And in this case, it doesn't, so I'll just click the Finish button. My changes are now reflected here, and when I click OK, I now have a subscription to this site, which means that every night a connection will be made to the site, the contents will be downloaded, they'll be stored in my cache, and I can use them either offline, or even if I'm online and I visit the site, it'll speed up the rate at which the site is displayed, because all the content doesn't need to be downloaded for me since it's already in the cache. That's a subscription. It's actually quite easy to create here by using the website subscription wizard, and it's not a bad experience for end users. The one bummer about subscriptions, though, is that if I want to get all the pages that are 2 levels deep, I have to get everything that's 2 levels deep. And what we've done is, by creating the feature of channels and creating CDF, we've made it possible for site authors to improve that for end users. So let me show you what a channel is. Basically, a channel is an ordinary website that has ordinary HTTP servers and ordinary HTML content and Java applets and so on that's supplemented with a CDF file to provide hints about which pages should get downloaded to the user's machine. Let's take a look at an example. What I'm going to do here is on my desktop I have my channel bar with some channels that are populated by default. I'm going to click on the Forbes channel. What we do is we open the browser, this is a regular web browser, in full screen mode, which I already showed you, and tune to the Forbes content. The Forbes content is ordinary HTTP, ordinary HTML. In this case, Forbes is using some dynamic HTML, but their CDF file tells which stuff to get downloaded and when. And one of the other nice features about the CDF is that it can describe the pages over here in sort of a table of contents that users can browse. So this is one example. Let me take and just show you another example. The Arcadia Bay channel here is an example of how a corporation might use channels to broadcast information that's interesting to different employees. This is a within the company kind of thing. So people who work in advertising at the Arcadia Bay company get this channel and can find out what's relevant with their division and so on. Finally, let me show you one other example. I'll go to the MSNBC channel. Excuse me, so you can see how the CDF file can provide this table of contents. Under MSNBC, I've got world news, continuing coverage, and a whole list of stories that are pages out on the server. And when I click on each one, I navigate directly there. This provides end users with an easy-to-use, uniform way of navigating between stories on your site. And you can do all of this, create that table of contents, create a richer download experience, and make it easier for people to get to your content offline just by creating one CDF file and adding it to your site. And later on, Castado is going to come out and explain how you go about doing all that. That pretty much wraps up the webcasting features of IE4. The last thing that I want to give you a quick look at is features that we call true web integration. True web integration is about taking your Windows desktop and your hard disk browser and making it work just like the web. So let's take a look. The first thing I want to show you is the Windows desktop. When you've installed the True Web Integration feature, your Windows desktop works like a web page. When I mouse over my computer, it acts like a hyperlink, and I can single click on it. When I bring it up, it looks and works like a web page. And as I browse around my hard disk, it works like the web, browsing in one window and offering me a back button for browsing around just like I would with a web browser. WebView is one of the features of true web integration. I want to show you one of the reasons why we think this will make using a PC easier for people. What I have here is the contents of a floppy disk that I actually took, and it was a driver for a modem that I bought. And when I opened up the floppy disk using Windows 95, this is what I would get. So if I want to install this driver, I have no idea what to click on. It's just a big mess of icons. Do I click on setup.bat or setup.exe, or do I click on the thing called install up here? I don't know. One of the nice things about WebView and allowing folders to look like web pages is that someone who ships out a folder or publishes a folder on a corporate network on an ordinary file server can provide an HTML page that gives that folder a rich view. So here I can see the modem driver installation instructions and the one icon that I need to click on to set up the driver. Furthermore, the WebView can include links to other sites and so on. So you really get a seamless experience and a richer experience for looking at the contents of ordinary folders. One person actually, I want to reach over here. We got some email from Roy Burkhead in Nashville, Tennessee, and he has seen some of the true web integration features, and he asked, he said, previous versions of IE have given users a choice between working on the desktop or working on the web. Personally, he's not sure whether he is simply used to the separation or if he prefers it. It seems that with IE4, I will no longer have the choice. I'm forced to be integrated with the web on my desktop. And he asks, is there a time that we've thought about giving users a choice of integration levels with 4.0? So I want to show you a feature here that really directly addresses Roy's question. We think that the true web integration features are a good thing for most users, but we also want to provide people with an easy way to configure them. So what I'll do is I'm going to go to the options dialog and show you how we've done that. You can see here I'm working in web-style integration mode, and up here I get a preview of what that means. My folders will look like web pages, I'll support single clicking, and so on. But if I want, I can just choose classic-style integration, where I'll get multiple windows, my icons will work just like they did in Windows 95, and so on. And if you really want, you can click on Custom and go in and tweak all the details about what those settings mean. So Roy, I hope you'll be satisfied with the fact that we're trying to make this really, truly configurable so that you end users can set your systems up really the way you want them and the way that works most properly and most effectively for you. The last thing that I want to show here is the active desktop. The active desktop in IE4.0 is basically the same Windows desktop, but now it supports HTML. And since it supports HTML, we've also added some features that end users can customize it to contain whatever content they want. So what I'm going to do here is actually show you a quick example, and I'm going to navigate to a web page and say I'm looking at this cool Java clock. This is an actual Java applet. It's a rotating 3D clock. And what I'm going to do is just stick it on my desktop. I'm going to do that by going up here to the icon in the caption bar and dragging with the right mouse button out to my desktop. So I'll get a context menu. And from the context menu, I'm going to choose Create Active Desktop Item here. And when I select that, it'll ask, am I sure I want to add this to the desktop? And once I say yes, my desktop will refresh. And there you'll see I have the Java clock literally now sitting out on my desktop, embedded in my desktop area. So I can add any type of HTML content here, including Java applets, ActiveX controls, GIF images, HTML pages. It doesn't matter. Whatever you can author for the web in HTML, you can author and place on your desktop. And later on today, Chris Brown's going to come out and show you how you can do that. One of the really neat features about the active desktop is that it enables corporate administrators or other people to customize the desktop to really match end users' jobs or to give them a customized environment that really fits to what they're trying to do. And I'll show you a quick example of a corporate desktop wallpaper that we created as a sample to show you what corporate administrators could do, creating web pages that sit on ordinary servers and might serve as custom desktops for end users. So this is an example of an Arcadia Bay company sales division desktop, where everyone in the sales division sees a preview of how their division is doing. They get news flashes here, including we even got a news flash here from our CEO, which I can see in the desktop as a net show. And finally, an edit control where users can type in any kind of query and search their corporate intranet. And this is an example of the things that you can do just by authoring HTML, Java applets, ActiveX control and scripting, dynamic HTML, and the places that you can put it. And that pretty much wraps up my IE4 demo. I hope that you've been able to follow this, the 4 key areas best browsing, complete communication and collaboration, webcasting, and true web integration. There's a lot here for you to learn, and I hope that you'll look forward to the rest of the day and getting into the details of how you can create this stuff. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot, Joe. And like I said, what Joe is showing you is what the end user is going to see. A lot of really cool and exciting features that Internet Explorer 4.0 brings to Windows on the desktop. Now, a lot of those capabilities are one that you can actually target with your website. Now, throughout the rest of the day, we're going to be talking about dynamic HTML. We're going to be talking about some of the cascading style sheet capabilities. We're going to be talking about channels and how you can use some of those features. But one of the other things we're going to do is we're going to have these little short segments called In the Spotlight. These are short video segments where we've actually gone out to other companies who have been implementing channels, adding dynamic HTML to the websites for IE4, and hearing from them specifically what their experiences have been, what their thoughts are, and how they're using it on their websites to really create exciting content. The first of these In the Spotlight segments is from Corbis. Let's go take a look at it.
Corbis is the place to find digital images on the web.
Corbis is photography. It's photography from everywhere in the world. It's from inside museums, and it's from outer space, and it's from underneath the water.
We have one of the largest collections of digital images anywhere in the world. If it's digital, we have it.
It's really kind of capturing the human and the earthly experience of everything.
Trip started off as an experiment to see how far we could push the technology.
We were brought into a meeting and told we were going to be starting to work on this new project for Corbis, and it was going to be part of the launch of IE4, and it was going to be a channel, and none of us knew what that was. But we knew the content would have to change on a daily basis. We knew that it had to change on a weekly basis, and we knew we'd be able to do things so much beyond what we could do on the regular internet using HTML. Our feeling was that even out on the internet, so much is text-driven. Our days are filled with numbers and words, and the internet's full of a lot of text. And what if we created an experience that used photography and used exotic places and places that we all have always dreamt of going as just a mini escape, just a few minutes away from where you otherwise are all day.
IE4 and dynamic HTML have really helped us to create the kind of dynamic content that we're used to creating.
One of the things we can do in IE4 that we couldn't do in IE3 is bring the images to life in a very random and exciting manner so that you get interesting juxtapositions of images and places and faces. And it's something that we could never have done without IE4.
Every day the user can come to their desktop, update the desktop item, and get a new set of images, get a new experience. And it doesn't become stale like a lot of traditional web sites have become.
If you check out the home screen on our site, I think it's pretty amazing what's going on there. We have some scaling live text, which is really cool. There's some little animation control on the side. But IE4 has all these features, and we just tried to milk what we could out of them.
In dynamic HTML, through the use of cascading style sheets, the ability to scale and rotate objects on the fly, we're able to create a lot of the effects and a lot of the interesting motion and dynamic that's in our site.
A main difference that I have loved is that you don't need to use tables to lay out complicated graphical images.
We used the path control, which allowed us to bring objects, move them around the screen from one place to another while we're translating and rotating them.
All of the functionality in the game is done client-side. There's no hits back to the server. Everything's done in JavaScript and VB script dynamically. The random choosing of the images, the tones, the multimedia being played, the judging whether or not the user won or lost. And we get feedback whether the user won or lost. All of this is done client-side.
IE4 is really powerful. For some of the content screens, we're able to leverage things like the structured graphics control for mouse behaviors and stuff, and scaling of type for like the home screen creates a real spatial illusion, like you're actually traveling, getting closer to the type. So little features like that were great.
We try to make our technology invisible in that it's not, wow, look at how many things are happening at once, but you just kind of get involved with the piece at hand, and you get involved with really working with the content in front of you, and the technology allows us to do that. IE4 gives us a tremendous number of ways, and we can choose different technologies based on whether we're concerned about bandwidth or performance or what the user experience needs to be. So the process has changed in that I have a bigger bag of tricks to work with.
Right now, it's just the most powerful environment out there for what you can do. You can bring behavior from CD titles right out to the web. It's totally convincing. Right now, if you look at our site, it doesn't really seem like a web page. There's mouse behavior in all the buttons, streaming sound, things are growing. It's just amazing.
The whole experience is really meant to be a 2-minute vacation on your desktop.
It's adventure travel meets the web generation.
Okay. We hope you've all now had a chance to kind of settle down in your seats a little bit and get relaxed and kind of pay attention to what we've been showing you so far. Put your seatbelts on. We're now going to take and start diving into code to show you how you can make use of some of these capabilities. One of the best features of IE4 is something that's called dynamic HTML. And dynamic HTML has an awful lot involved in it. It exposes an awful lot of capabilities and features to you, the web author. And here to show us what some of those capabilities are and how you can target them and learn more about adding them to your website in a great and exciting ways is Michael Wong, Lead Program Manager for the IE Dev team. Robert, how you doing? So, with what's going on with Internet Explorer 4.0 and all the things being added, I mean, like, we're hearing a lot of different buzzwords. We saw a lot of stuff that Joe was showing in his demo. We've seen a lot of stuff in the press, people that install the preview release on their systems. I mean, a lot of stuff going on. But I know, for me, I think dynamic HTML is one of the features that adds the meat to the site and exposes a lot of stuff people have been asking for in a long time. So, in like, a dozen words, can you tell us what dynamic HTML actually is?
So about 2 years ago, we actually started working on dynamic HTML. We looked at the state of the web and said, the next great thing for web content isn't going to be a new tag or a new attribute. What we really wanted to do is make the tags and attributes that authors were used to working with more dynamic and more accessible. So essentially, with dynamic HTML, through scripting, you can access all the elements on the page and all the attributes of all the elements at any time and change any attribute whenever you want. It's totally dynamic.
So you're saying that rather than taking and coming out with a new tag, like whether it's marquee or blink, just to do some sort of little visual feature on the page, you're actually allowing dynamic HTML to do that instead using existing tags by the author figuring out how he wants to do that on his page.
Exactly. We've heavily leveraged CSS in this case because there's about 40 different CSS attributes, all of which you can apply to virtually any element on the page. And CSS is really interesting, and it's great when you initially have your page set up and you have borders or a background color. But with dynamic HTML, you can actually change all of those CSS attributes at any time and have the page immediately reflect the change that the author requests.
So now with this being something new to IE4, is it something that's like just a Microsoft thing or something?
Absolutely not. This is a natural extension of the way that people have been scripting web pages for a couple years now. With previous browsers, you had access to some of the elements on the page. For example, anchors, image maps, form elements. But with dynamic HTML and IE4, we use the same techniques to actually access all the elements and all the attributes on the page. It's a very natural extension of what we've already done. And in fact, we're going through the standards committee, and some of these things are W3C standards already.
So HTML and CSS, what we've already got, we're now just taking and making that more programmable.
Exactly. It's all about programmability. In fact, a lot of the features that we're going to see today don't require a single new tag. In fact, the 4 things that we talk about when we talk about dynamic HTML, dynamic styles, dynamic content, data binding, and dynamic positioning require a total of 7 new attributes. That's it. Not a single new tag is required.
Well, let's take a look at what some of this stuff looks like.
Great. So the first thing we actually want to go through is kind of like go into the Wayback Machine and take a look at a little bit of CSS and how we actually do CSS on a page, because CSS is one of the great things you can actually do with dynamic HTML. So here's a simple page that we created, and Nadja in the upcoming design segment might take issue with it, but in any case, this page simply has a series of H2s on it. There's 5 of them, in fact. Now, the first one has no style. So, and all the rest of them are using a Verdana font, and they're using a blue color. So they all do it in a very different way. So let's see exactly how they do it. So here's the actual HTML for this page, and we notice, first of all, that there are 5 H2s. So the first H2 is just standard. It has no style, right? Black, boring. The next one is an H2, and it's setting what we call an inline style. So we see it has a style tag. It says style equals font family Verdana semi color blue. And that's it. It makes it Verdana and blue. And we just did it right on the element. Now, the next thing actually uses what we call a class. And a class is nothing but a collection of CSS attributes. So in this case, we defined a class called myClass up in the style section of the document, which always has to be in the head. So we say .myClass, and it looks very much like what you'd said in the style tag itself. We say fonts Verdana, the color's blue. We just use that class. It's easy to reuse things in that way. The next H2 uses a class again, but its class is set to link class. Now, you don't actually see link class defined in the style part of the document. Actually, what we've done is we've actually defined that in the style sheet in a separate file, and we're linking it in. We're using this link tag here to bring in sheet1.css, and it's sheet1.css that actually defines link class. So that gets applied as well. So the third one is set to class import class. Now, import class is another class. It's defined to be Verdana and blue. But we're actually bringing that in with the add import mechanism up in the style block. So there's actually a number of ways that you can apply CSS attributes to elements on your page. But this is all just static. This is the way the page opens.
This is like just base cascading style sheet capabilities.
Exactly.
Now, I do notice, however, that having done a lot of cascading style sheet coding myself, that this is using some features that weren't in IE3.
Exactly. The add import, most notably, and we handle link style sheets much more cleanly than we did before. And it's also important to note that we support the full CSS1 specification now in IE4.
The full CSS spec?
The full CSS spec.
Including, like, first letter?
Including first letter, yes.
Cool. Hey, I want to use that one.
All right. OK, so now we've seen how we can just use CSS in a very kind of, I don't know, the way we've always done it before. So let's actually look how we can use CSS in a very dynamic way with IE4. So this page, very simple. It once again has a series of H2s and H3s on them, but now it's dynamic. I can click on things. So the first H2, it says click me, I turn red. So let's oblige it. We'll click on it, and it turns red.
Now, since you're clicking on that, I assume it's like an anchor you're catching, but I noticed that the cursor was just the standard bar cursor.
Well, actually, it's not an anchor. It's just a H2. And one of the things that we have in IE4 that makes it really easy to build web applications is we source events, a full set of events on every element on the page. Mouse, keyboard, focus, you name it, we source it, every event.
On anything?
On anything. That's it.
Paragraphs?
Everything. Paragraphs, bold tags, italic tags, spans, divs, underlines, strong. You want me to go on?
No, that's
okay.
I can run the list through my own head.
OK. So the next line it turns red as well. So let's try to click on that. So we click on it, the cursor turns to a hand, bing, red.
OK, now, and this time you were actually using anchor because I saw the hand turn to a...
So one of the CSS attributes that we support in IE4 is the cursor CSS attribute. And we'll see how that's implemented when we take a look at the code in a second. But you can set one of 16 cursors on any element on the page. You can have the hand, the help, the move, the I-beam, the movers, you name it.
So that would allow someone to take and put an element on their page that was clickable but wasn't an anchor, and still give the user feedback as here's something you can actually click on or do some other sort of event with.
Exactly. Or if you wanted an element on the page when the user clicked on it and it moved around, you might want to show the move cursor instead. So let's try the next one. Now we're getting into more advanced territory now. So we'll click on this next line and notice the line below it is going to disappear and reappear, and disappear and reappear.
Okay, so now by advanced, you mean you're just turning the color white here for the text?
Actually not. We're using the visibility CSS attribute, and the valid values of visibility are like hidden and visible. So, or actually invisible and visible. So what we're doing down below is we have an H3, and we're setting its style to visible and invisible. Visible, invisible.
So if I had a graphic background on the page, the graphic background now show where the text used to be at.
Exactly.
So essentially what you've done is you've now created the blink tag using dynamic HTML.
I don't want to go there.
Okay, okay.
Okay, so let's try the next line. Now, this one is kind of the cousin of visibility. It uses what we call the display attribute. So when I click on it, the next line is going to go away, but look what happens to the document. It pretends like that line was never there. It does what we call reflow on the page. So we're using the display property, we've set it to none, and when you set it to none, it goes away, it's invisible, but it says, remember that space that I was taking up? Pretend that I was never taking it up, and have the rest of the document reflow into position.
Now when you say reflow, is that just kind of a fancy word for refresh?
Absolutely not. Refresh and reflow are two totally separate beasts, and in fact, IE4 is the only browser that supports dynamic reflow. When you set any attribute on the page, if the element needs to take up more space, it will. If it will take up less space, it will. And we'll see that time and time again in all the demos today. So, we'll make it come back. Now, down below, kind of a boring example again, we're going to click on it, and it's going to turn red, but we'll see when we look at the script exactly how it's different. So the next one is a little more interesting, and as we click on it, it appears to kind of gray out a bit and kind of fade away.
Okay, now here by a little more interesting, you're just kind of changing the color from black to silver to gray to white.
Well, see, that's probably giving me more credit than I deserve, that I could figure out what all those colors would be in Hex. But no, we're not doing that. What we're actually using is the CSS filter property and using alpha blending to fade it out. And to kind of make the example a little more kind of funky, let's actually add a background here, my favorite background, the IE logo background. So we're going to try it again. We're going to fade it out. And notice how the image kind of bleeds through. It actually alpha blends onto the page.
So
fades out. Bye-bye.
These filters, you can apply to text to take and have their color fade out in this fashion. Can you do the same thing to images or anything?
Absolutely. Anything you can put on the HTML page, you can apply CSS filters. And we have really cool things like the glow filter and the 3D shadow filter and really interesting stuff like that. And you don't actually need to use any object tags at all to make that happen. It's simply a CSS attribute. So let's take a look at the code for this page and see exactly how we did it. So notice we have some H2s. So let's actually look up here at the first H2, and remember, it was an H2, it didn't change the cursor, I clicked on it and it turned red. So the H2 handles the onClick event. Once again, we can get events on anything on the page. When we click, we say this.style.color equals red. Turns it red, really simple. Now, the next line should look pretty familiar, but the only difference here is that we're setting the cursor attribute. We're setting the cursor to hand. Now note that you don't have to do funny things like when I mouse over this element, change the cursor, when I mouse out, change it back. You don't have to do that. When you set the cursor attribute, it means when the cursor is over me, change it to what I specify. So you don't have to use any event handling at all to actually control the cursor on the page. So it makes it a lot simpler to manage.
So the cursor is like a direct property of that particular item.
Exactly.
And you could have like a dozen different things on your page, all having different cursor, and just set the cursor in one spot, and that's it. Just flows across.
That would be very interesting. So let's go to the next one. The next line, H2, setting the cursor to hand once again. And when we click on it, we're calling the toggle visibility method. And we're passing in visibility toggle. Now, visibility toggle, you want to note, is actually the ID of the H3 immediately below it that said, I become invisible. So let's look down into the script code and see the code for toggle visibility. So toggle visibility, remember, takes a parameter. It's an element. So what we're doing is we're going into the style element. We're checking its visibility. We're seeing if it's hidden. If it's hidden, we make it visible. And if it's not, we make it hidden. That's how we get the kind of toggling behavior.
So by passing in the name of the element,
the actual element itself,
that passes the element into
exactly.
Right.
So now the next line was the much more complicated case of using display. So let's see how much more complicated that code actually was. So we have an H2, should look very familiar. We're setting the style to cursor hand so we get the hand effect. When we click on it, we call toggle display with, surprise, display toggle, the ID of the H3 immediately below it. So let's take a look at the code. You might have seen it as I scrolled down last time. So here's the code to toggle the display. Pass in the element, check the style for display. Is it none? Make it quote, quote. If it's not, make it none. On, off, on, off. Now you'll notice there's not a single extra line of code I had to write to tell the document to reflow. It's because reflow is automatic.
So as soon as you change anything, IE knew that something on the display was changing, and it just changed the display right then.
Just like that. So now, for the last example we had was when we were fading something out. So what we had here is we had a div, and on the div we put style cursor hand, we gave it a height and width, and we also set the CSS filter property to alpha. Now, alpha is one of the names of a filter that we support. So initially, we didn't give it any parameters because its opacity was going to be 100%, which means it looks just like it will always look. And when we click on it, we fade out, and we pass into this pointer, which is actually the div. So let's look at the fade out code. What it's actually doing is it gets the current opacity of the filter. So we go e.filters. Filters is a collection of all the filters currently set on the element. We look for the alpha filter. We look for it by name. And then opacity is a property of the alpha filter. And that's a number that comes back. I check to see if the opacity is greater than 0. If it's greater than 0, I decrement it by 20. It's a percentage from 0 to 100. And that's how I get that fade out effect as it goes down. That simple.
And all the other filters have the same sort of capabilities like that?
Right. All the filters expose specialized properties and methods on them to do what they would do. Like, for example, it wouldn't make sense to have glow have opacity. Glow defines its own kind of glow color and glow depth and things like that.
And you can change all those on the fly to get the same sort of effect? Like
Dynamically.
Dynamically. Wow. Now, since we're taking and changing all this stuff dynamically and you know, checking the color, I assume you can do things like fonts, sizes. Now I can picture that you can use something like setting the margins. And one of the things I do is often with CSS is I'll use negative margins and have 2 lines of text and negative margin 1 up behind the other to get like a shadow effect on it. Can I do the same thing here dynamically to make things actually move and such?
You can absolutely do the same thing dynamically, but one of the things that we've actually added in IE4 is this whole idea of dynamic positioning. So we can position elements in 2D space on the page. And it might be a little bit easier way to do it as opposed to using negative margins. So let's take a look at a page that does that. Oops, wrong page. That page, that's much better. So it's more positioning oriented as opposed to dynamic content oriented. Okay, so here's our dynamic positioning page. So you'll notice we have a little shadow effect up at the top, and we had a cool little fly-in effect as the page loaded. So let's take a look and see exactly how this worked. Okay, so the first thing we had up at the top is notice that there's 2 divs, right? The first one is setting position absolute. Now, there's 2 ways we can position things. We can position things absolutely, and when you position something absolutely, you say, this is where I want it to be. I want it to be 10-10, top 10, left 10, always there, right? Now, it's always with respect to its container. So in this case, the div is in the body, so based on the body's coordinate system, it places that element. Now, the other way to position things is relative, and when you position something relatively, you say to the browser, please figure out where this thing should be, and then offset it by the position that I give you. And that's actually how we did the fly-in effect. We'll see that in a moment. So back to absolute. So we had one div, position absolute, top 10, left 10. And then that said dynamic positioning. And then right below it, we had another div, positioned absolute, top 13, left 13. So a little bit offset. Also made it gray to create that shadow effect. Gave it a z index below the one on top of it to make it below it, because I can control the z indexing. And it says dynamic positioning.
So then a benefit of using the absolute positioning here is that you're not going to futz around with point sizes. Because anytime on my pages I change the point size, or the user to accidentally point size up, point size down, I've got to go and change all the negative margins.
So if I changed font to larger or smaller, this would still look, it would still be offset by 3. It wouldn't look totally funky. So that was the shadow effect. Now it's also an important note that we could have done that shadow effect with an alpha filter, or excuse me, with a filter, CSS filter, the drop shadow effect, just as easily. But in this case, we wanted to show absolute positioning.
So now in that case, if I had used the shadow filter, which sounds like be more the appropriate way of doing it, I wouldn't have to have 2 lines of text sitting here, so that if I was looking at this with a browser that did not support cascading style sheets, I would still see just 1 line of text.
Exactly.
If I was using IE4, I'd then see the shadow side.
You'd see the cool effect.
That's a cool effect.
Okay. So let's look at the other things on the page. So we have a bunch of divs. Here we have 4 of them. And their style is set to position relative. Now the first one says Microsoft, it's top 600. So that means figure out where it should be and increment it way up to the top. Now remember that Microsoft flew in from the bottom, or flew in from the top. Then we had leads the way, and they're coming in from different relative positions. Negative 800, 800 to the left, 600 from the top. And then we had my favorite, IE GIF, coming in from the left. So now remember that with relative positioning, when you position something relatively, its 0, 0 position is where the browser thinks it should be and where its space is reserved. It's kind of like reserved seating for elements on the page. So if I move something back to 0, 0, it will go back and look just like it was never positioned at all. So what we actually have here is a function that's going to take advantage of that to fly things back to their 0, 0 position. When the page initially loaded, everything was way off, and then it came back together. Way off, came back together. So when the document loads, we have the window on load event here in this script. We call the function fly text in, and we're saying text1. Now, text1, remember, is the ID of that div Microsoft. So let's take a look at what fly text in does. So fly text in, what it does is it says, OK, well, I know that I'm actually going to be using a window.setTimeout loop. So to take, in this case, in 15 ticks, I'm going to move the object from where it is to where it needs to be. So thank you. So what I do is I divide the current position by the number of ticks it's going to take, and that gives me a delta top, delta left. So with each tick, I know exactly how much I'm going to move it to its back to 0, 0. So then I increment this counter, current count, and then I call window.setTimeout do fly for a given millisecond timeout, in this case, which is 20 milliseconds.
Now, using set timeout, couldn't you have just done like a for loop instead to spin through that cycle to make the animate just kind of in one full sweep?
Well, see, I could have done it that way, but there's a couple problems using that technique. The first problem is that you're not going to be giving the browser enough time slices to paint itself properly. If you're busily calculating in a loop, you're going to be updating the position, but the browser isn't going to get a chance to paint because the script is actually taking up all the cycles. It's into like a busy waiting loop. Now, the other thing is for security reasons, what we do is we detect if script is running for more than 2 seconds in an uninterrupted fashion, we actually pop up UI to the user saying, you know what, the script is hogging the CPU. You may want to kill it because it's kind of take over, which we don't want to have happen.
So you want to be a well-behaved citizen, allow the application time to actually do the animation that's you're asking for it to do.
Right.
And so set timeout's usually better than a for loop just spinning on the code.
Right, and just another note, you can actually take advantage of this feature because you know if you update the X and the Y position, you won't have the user experience of having to go tick, 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 because we'll do it in one operation. We'll paint once and we'll update the new position, so it'll look a lot smoother. Okay. So, anyways.
Now, another thing I'm noticing is that on your code here, we have the e.dt and e.dl.
Right.
Now,
so
are those like new attributes you're setting in there? Or?
Actually not. I'm using a feature we call expando properties, where I can add arbitrary properties to any element at any time. So what I've done here is I've created a special attribute bucket for delta top, delta left, put it on each element, as opposed to having to create an array off to the side where I keep some global variables and make it work that way. I can just put any attribute on any element at any time, and it makes it really easy to track complex changes as they go along. It's kind of like your own little private storage mechanism.
So it's like it's a local variable that's attached to the space that particular object is taking up within IE's data space someplace.
Right. And it's in scope for the entire time that element is in scope. So you don't have to worry about it being trashed or anything. So,
and then also on the values you're setting here for pause top and pause left. Now, is that just a new variable as well, or is there some variable using expando properties on?
Actually, what we did is all CSS properties, when they're returned from the style object, come back as strings. So we noticed that in beta 1, people were dealing with top, left, width, and height, and they were always doing a parse function, parsing it to an integer and then manipulating it. So what we actually did is for script authors, we added these pause features into the style object for pause top, pause left, pause width, and pause height, which return a floating point representation of the top, left, width, and height, so you can actually do math on it directly without having to parse it. It also makes script like this a lot faster because parsing is a relatively slow function.
And also, I expect because the values are being stored in IE as numbers themselves,
right.
And IE was having to convert the number to string, and if user or the author was converting the string to a number again, you're just reversing yourself.
Right. So we still support, you can still set the left and top properties directly, but pause top, pause left, pause width, pause height, make it an easier thing if you want to do math on them. So moving on, so what it does is it calls do fly. Now do fly, what it's doing is it's incrementing the count and then just moving the top and left positions by the deltas that we've specified. Then what it does is it checks to see, oh, is my current count less than my fly count? If it is, then I know I need to move another time, so it calls window.setTimeout again on the same do fly function. If not, it says, okay, I'm done positioning this object. So then what I'm doing is I'm positioning the top and left back to 0 because I may have some rounding errors here. So I move it back to 0, 0. And then if I'm flying text 1, I then fly text 2. If I'm 2, then 3. 3, then 4. 4, then 5. That's it. So that's why I get that sequential effect. So let's go back to the page. Just take a look at one quick thing. So notice that the text here is relatively small. I think I want to have the text be larger.
Okay.
So the benefit of using relative positioning is that what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change the font size for the document and refresh it, and what we're going to notice is that the text is larger, but I didn't change a single line of positioning code.
And that's because the relative positioning was actually storing the space ahead of time.
Exactly. The document figured out where it should be, and that's how it got the positioning back in. So that's the power of positioning.
So besides just changing some of the display attributes like that, the colors, the fonts, and some positioning stuff, what else is capable with dynamic HTML?
So everything that we've seen right now has simply been changing attributes. Right? Lots of things are attributes, a lot of really powerful things we can do. But one of the other really cool things we can do with dynamic HTML is actually change the underlying HTML of the page. If we don't want to have a page say this, we can have it say that.
Well, weren't we kind of doing that with that display property?
We were kind of doing that, but the elements were in the page already. We weren't actually changing the text that was in the element itself. So we have a feature we call dynamic content that actually allows us to change the underlying HTML or text of the page on the fly whenever we want.
I've seen this page before.
So what we have here is we have two elements on the page. We have a div, and we've named it div1. Not very inventive, I'm sorry. And it has a green background, and it has some text in it that says, this is a div. And a div, once again, is just an arbitrary container of HTML. And then I also have an image, image1, very inventive names. But what I can do with this page is it's predefined, so I can change the text on the page automatically, or change the HTML on the page automatically. So first thing I'm going to do is select the thing I want to change. Well, I want to change div1 first. And I can pick the new text, or the new HTML that I want to insert. So I say, this is new text and image, and I'm putting in my favorite image, once again, the IE GIF. Then step 3, I want to select the property or method that I want to use. So the property that I want to set on the div can be one of 4 things: inner HTML, inner text, outer HTML, or outer text. Now, with the inner HTML methods and the inner text methods, I can actually replace the HTML currently inside that div. So, for example, if I didn't want it to say this is a div anymore, but I want it to say new text and have an image, I would say inner HTML on the div, and I'll do it, and we'll see what happens. So it says this is new text, and now we have the little image. Kind of interesting. So what if I wanted to display new content onto the page, but it had some characters in there that are really reserved for HTML, like less than, greater than, and it was, in this case, let's say I wanted to actually have the text img source equals ie.gif onto the page.
Appear as code.
As code. So as opposed to using the inner HTML property, I'd use the inner text property. And what it tells the browser then is, take this text, blast it onto the page verbatim. Don't parse it at all. So let's take a look and try that out. So we'll try inner text, we'll blast it in, and we see that it shows the text just as is, just verbatim.
So now all you had to do then is just say div1.innerText equals, and then the string.
Exactly. Exactly. So what we've seen so far is kind of interesting, but you know, it's not really all that dynamic. And this is really about dynamic HTML. So what I want to do now, before we go too far, is I'm going to do something a little more interesting. So I'm going to say input type equals button. And Robert's going to watch to make sure I don't have any typos here. Value equals dynamic onClick equals alert dynamic HTML. Close, semicolon, close quote, close brace. Inner HTML, do it. Now we have a button. Now remember that I put an onClick handler on that button to pop up an alert dialog. So let's see and make sure we don't get the error dialog, which is not the dialog I'm looking for. There we go. Here's the alert dynamic HTML. So I can even insert new script onto the page on the fly. And the page can be, in fact, self-modifying.
So you could allow, let's say you want to be a training page, something like that. You could actually allow the user to type in script code and say execute the script and execute it on that page itself by using that same feature.
Exactly. So that's dynamic HTML.
OK.
So I'm just erasing what I wrote, because that was awfully long. OK, so right now we've seen the inner methods. We've changed the inside of a div. Now the div is a container. But what we might want to do in some cases is make the whole div go away. Let's say that green background, it matches the set, but hey, it's too much. I don't like the green background anymore. So what I actually want to have is just some new text. So I'll say new text, and I'll even put in my favorite image, ie.gif. Source equals, a little typing test again, ie.gif. And so this time, as opposed to using inner HTML, I'm going to use outer HTML. So the div is going to be destroyed. This is going to be a destructive operation for the div. So let's try that out and see what happens. So the div went away. And we know that because the background color is no longer there. The div is no longer on the page. There is no more thing called div1 on this page.
So if you were to take and actually try to assign that same thing to div1 again, it's like assigning something to something that doesn't exist, and you get a
I might get a little script error. We don't really want to show folks the great script error dialog we have. So what I'm going to do now so we can continue with this page is refresh it. So back to normal. So I used outer HTML. I can also use outer text if I wanted to have it go away and be parsed. So there I see just the text on the page, standard sort of thing.
So you essentially do the same thing, either as rendered HTML or as straight code text, either inside of the div without destroying the div, or outside of the div that actually destroys the div1 or whatever item you happen to be changing.
Exactly. So, but not all tags on the HTML page have a begin tag and an end tag. Some tags, like image, as we have on this page, only have a single tag. So you can't really use the inner methods on the image tag because there's no real inner. If you wanted to set the source, you just set the source. Pretty simple. So what I actually want to do here is I can use the outer methods on the image, but when I do that, the image is going to go away. So let's actually try that. So
that's because outer is always destructive.
That's right. Outer is always destructive. So the thing I want to change is image 1. I'm going to blast in my same old text, except I'm going to use outer HTML. I'm going to do it, and there I get it. Now, I'm going to refresh again. I use the outer text property, and it just inserts in the text.
So both of those operations actually destroyed the image that was named.
That's correct. That's correct. So what I could do if I wanted to be cute is I could actually put an ID on the image that I'm about to insert, and I could call it image 1. Make sure I type that right. OK. We'll try it. Oops. See, I need to use the outer HTML method if I want to insert an image called inner. Oh, those darn live shows. So we use outer HTML. We'll try it. We get the image. We'll try it again. We keep on inserting. Very fun. So that's dynamic content. So you've heard me talk about, probably to the point of confusion, about all these events. Everything is events. You click on this, something happens. You click on that, something happens. You mouse over this, something happens. Something focus, something happens. So we have a lot of events in IE4. We have a lot of events. We have events on everything. So one of the things that we've done to make handling events a lot easier is we've implemented this idea called event bubbling. Now, this is nothing new. Every operating system known to man or woman to this point in time has used event bubbling. Think about the way Windows handles events. When you click on a button, if the button doesn't handle the event, it actually goes up to the parent, kind of sourcing the events all the way up until it falls out of the application. That's the way that Windows works. That's the way OS/2 works. That's the way the Mac works. That's the way Motif works. That's the way systems work. Now, HTML, not so much. HTML, when an event happened on an element, if you didn't trap the event right there, the event was gone. Out of luck. With so many events on the page, we decided that that was going to be really hard. So we implemented event bubbling in HTML. So let's see the benefit of that. So you should pay very close attention to this page, Robert, because we have a surprise coming up for you in a couple minutes.
Oh, I like surprises.
OK. So, so here's our menu for today. Right? Milk, cookies,
food surprise.
eggs.
I like it even better. Yeah.
I'm hungry. I don't know about you. So ham, cheese, pasta, chicken, my favorite food products. So let's take a look at this script and how this works.
Now with that, you're just mousing over those sort of things and changing dynamically the styles and attributes during the mouse over process.
Very close, yeah. So what we have here is we've actually defined 2 classes in the head of the document. Whoops. We've defined the item class and the highlight class. Item gives me that blue with white text, sets the cursor, Verdana blue, you know, that kind of stuff. Highlight is the reverse video. It's white foreground, blue background, little italicized, funky stuff like that. So what we have here is we then have a series of 7 spans. And remember, span is just an arbitrary container of HTML. And what we've done is we've set the class on each one of those spans to item. So initially it's blue. So down below, now note that you don't see a single event handler hooked up for any of these things.
Yeah, no, they just all have the same item to get the style in there, but
that's right. No event handlers. So down below, what we've actually done is we've created a function called roll on. So roll on is going to be the event handler for mouse over for the document. So what happens is whenever we mouse over anything on the page, nothing is actually handling mouse over, so the event bubbles up to its parent. So in the case of the span, right, the parent of the span is the body of the document. So I could have put a mouse over handler on the body, but I didn't. The body events bubble up to its parent, which is the document. So I'm handling this 2 levels up from where it happened.
And so how'd you set the document event property then?
Well, I did it down here with this function object. So I said document.onMouseOver equals roll on. Right, just use function objects to make that happen.
Just one line of code for all of those items.
Exactly. So in the roll on function, and with event bubbling, it would be kind of silly if events just bubbled up and you said, oh, I trapped this event, mouse over, big deal. The key thing with event bubbling is you know who actually caused the event to occur. Who were you mousing over? The question is answered by the source element property on the event object. The event object is a special object that's created on the window every time an event fires, and it's in scope for the entire time that the event is being handled, and has lots of really interesting stuff on it. Like, for example, it has the X, Y position of the mouse, the shift state of the buttons, whether the special alternate keys pressed, the client rectangle that's available, things like that. And one of the other properties it has is source element. Source element is actually an element that caused the event. So in this case, when we're mousing over a span, the span is the source element. So we check the class name of the thing we're mousing over. If it's equal to item, we change it to highlight. And then when we're mousing off, if it's equal to highlight, we change it to item. It's that simple. Okay?
Okay, so all the items then are being handled by that one event. What would happen if one of those items I didn't want to have handled by the event?
Okay, so
pull that out of the chain
I've heard from Lunch Lady Doris that ham is not available on today's menu. So we want to make ham unavailable. So what we're going to do is we're going to have our own mouse over handler for this, and we're going to say window.event.cancel bubble equals true. Not true, true. Okay, so with event bubbling, I mentioned that only if something's handled does it not bubble up. So cancel bubble is the mechanism where you say, I've handled this event, let it go no further.
So just having processed the event, if you just said on mouse over, color equals blue.
That would not have been enough. It would have still bubbled.
You're not handling it, you're just doing something based upon it.
Exactly. And that actually is a really interesting feature because then at different levels of the document, you can actually apply different filters and different styles to it. It's kind of funky. You can do it that way.
So if I had this whole thing based inside of a paragraph, the paragraph actually could have done something different as well.
That's right.
Based upon the exact same mouse over this one event.
Exactly. So we've set on mouse over window.event.cancel bubble equals true. So that means that when you mouse over, it's never going to bubble up to the body, and it's never going to bubble up to the document. So the initial mouse over handler for the document isn't going to work to set the class from item to highlight when we go over ham, but ham only. So I've saved the page. Let's try it again just for luck. So mouse over, all the things work except, oh, no ham. Eggs, cookies, milk, cookies, eggs, no ham. Cheese, pasta, chicken, no ham.
Okay.
Pretty simple.
That is simple.
So we've seen so far how we can author script and actually write script to use dynamic HTML. But one of the things we hear about time and time again is using tools. So we've actually worked with a number of different companies to develop a set of design time controls that actually will emit HTML to use in your page. So what I'm going to do now is go into our design time controls page, and we can see that it is blank.
Very exciting. Very
because
dynamic.
we actually haven't put anything things in here yet. So what I'd like to do is go into Visual Interdev. I carefully have the same page open. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use an ActiveX control called the Sax Dynamic Outline. Thank you, Saxsoft. So it's going to pop up, and now I can do some outlining directly in here. So I'm going to be me, and I'm just going to use the names I use all the time. Item 1, Item 2, Item 2.2, 2.1, sorry. And then I can do things like now that I've created this outline, I can indent it.
Ooh, that's dynamic.
So, okay, so we're going to close that down. And notice that what happens is that design time control emitted HTML into my page that actually built that outline.
So a design time control then is like something that's running a small little applet for the designer.
Right.
That allows them to enter some data, and then we say, okay, I'm done with it. It then pushes that data back into the page itself.
Exactly. And the benefit is that there's no ActiveX controls running on your page. You just get the pure dynamic HTML. So we'll save this off. We will save it off. We're going to go back to our previously white page. We're going to refresh it. We're going to cross our fingers. What do you know? We have an outline. We can click on it, and it expands and collapses.
Ooh. And so it's all done dynamically then. So it's got using dynamic HTML. It's doing the hide and show or setting the display property to make sure that when you click on something, it adds a thing below it in that fashion.
Exactly. Just using pure dynamic HTML.
And you're using Sax's design time control to add that functionality without having to write all that code manually.
Exactly.
Well, I mean, basically, the code looks fairly light, unless you want to get really complicated with stuff. And so you can add a lot of capabilities with very little work.
Right. So I'm glad that you think that this is easy, because I have a friend who actually works at the Amalgamated Widget Corporation, and showed me his web page the other day, and not that good, right? Really needs some sprucing up. So we have just a typical thing. We have links along the top, kind of boring. You don't really know what's going on. The page has the problem that it's just too long. You have to scroll down. So we said, hey, we have some dynamic HTML that can make your page a lot better. So I knew about this event coming up, and I said, hey, I think Robert would be a great person to make this page use dynamic HTML.
But so the keyboard's in front of you, though.
Not for long. OK, so what we'd actually like to do is include our friend, the rollover effect, right?
OK.
And a new friend, Mr. Outline.
Like we saw with the design time control.
Right, except this time you're going to be flying without a net because you're going to include the script in without the design time control.
I can't use the design time. Oh my God! I got to code all that myself. Oh,
well, no, not really. We're going to show you some tricks to make it really easy to do. So we have the happy outlining. Once again, we see the very inventive names, item 1, item 2. So here's the dynamic Amalgamated Widget Corporation page, all for you. Now, just for you, I'll even open it up in the source editor for you. And just for you, I'm going to show you this directory, which is where the page is. And we're going to notice that the code for outlining is included in outline.js. I've created a style sheet called rollover.css and actually put the code for rollover in rollover.js. So as opposed to having to cut and paste into the new page, you can use the you can use the source attribute on the script tag to bring that script in. And remember, simply by changing the names and the IDs and the classes of items, we were able to apply effects. So we're actually going to walk through how to do that.
OK.
OK. So have at it.
I think I'm ready.
My trusty water.
Okay.
So the first thing that we actually want to do is put the rollover effect into the page. So the two things that you're going to have to do to pull in the rollover effect is to bring in the CSS style sheet and also bring in rollover.js.
OK, so let's
you might want to put that in the head.
OK.
Excellent. OK, script source equals. We didn't previously support the source equals, but now we do. So Robert's including the script for rollover.js, which is exactly the script that we saw in that previous rollover example. All the events are handled for us.
And since the script tag is a true container tag, that means even though I'm not going to have any content here on the page, I've got to still have the end tag for the script.
Yes, you still need the end tag. So the other thing we need to do is
OK, so now I need to put the style sheet?
The link style sheet, right?
OK, so.
And remember that link style sheets really should only be included in the head of the document.
And that was rollover.css.
Right, very simple names.
Rel equals style sheet.
Excellent. OK, so the only thing that we're going to have to do to apply the rollover effect into the page is set the class equal to item for the thing we want to get the rollover effect on.
OK, and that would be for that bar we had across the top. We're saying products,
exactly.
Financial, sales, mission, and people in search. OK, and looks like that's coming from this section of code here.
Looks very likely that that's the case, yes.
OK, so since all we need to do is set the class to rollover.
So we have a font here, and then inside the font tag is a strong tag. Then inside the strong tag is actually the anchor that we're getting. So what Robert is doing is set the class on the outer font tag, and let's see if that works. So we'll try this out. We'll refresh the page. Oh, that's
the big blue blob.
Not quite right. Huh. OK, so I thought this might happen. So to make this even simpler, we added some debugging code into that code we brought in. So if you'll notice, right up at the top, we have debug equal to false. So let's set it to true and see what happens. So what this debugging code is actually going to do is as we go mouse over, what it's going to show us down in the status bar is the tag name of the thing we're actually going mouse over. Because obviously we're not actually mousing over the font tag, we might be mousing over the strong or the actual anchor there. So looking down in the bottom, we see if we mouse over the top.
So right now I'm mousing over the bottom paragraph and I see it says font in the bottom. If I mouse off of that, it says body.
Right, so let's mouse up to the top and we see, oh, so as we mouse over it says A. So what we're actually mousing over, what's sourcing the mouse over, is the anchor, because the anchor is the innermost thing that contains the text.
And so that's the thing actually we'll be trapping upon.
Exactly.
Okay.
So it's the anchor that we want to set the class on, not the outer font.
Okay, so I'll just do a cut and go into the anchor right there.
Good deal?
And go to the next anchor.
Okay, so Robert is adding the class equal to item on all the anchors along the top. He's very confident that this will work. Very confident.
I'm a good study.
Okay, so let's try that out. Let's see how it looks. Bing. Ooh, I think he made a typo.
Oops, missed one of them.
Okay.
But how the rest of them work?
The rest of them work great. We'll clean that one up when we add in outlining into the page.
Okay, that was
Sales. So right now, as we look for the typo on the page,
anchor, class item mission. It was on the sales one right here. Oh, there we go.
Ooh.
Made it on the wrong side of
the wrong side of the close. We'll try it out. We'll look at it again.
There we go.
It works. Good thing. We can continue on. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to include outlining into the page. Now, the outlining code that we wrote is very simple. So you're going to include the outline.js into script, into the head, as we did before. So the way that this outlining code works is the thing that you click on to trigger the outline, we want to set its class to outline. Really simple. And we also want to give it an ID. And the script code is looking for something clicked on with its class equal to outline, and it's going to say, OK, look at the ID of this element. Now, the thing that's going to expand and collapse, set display none or display quote quote on, is going to be the thing with the ID plus the word child. So, for example, story1 will control story1 child. So simply by setting the IDs and setting the class, we get the outline effect. So let's try that out.
Okay, so story1 then would be the headlines I've got for each one of the little paragraphs here, and then the paragraph would be story1 child.
Exactly.
Okay. So that means we need to come back up here and include some more script.
Not text script. I didn't make any typos. I'll get punched for that later. So Robert's typing in outline.js, puts in the closed script tag.
Okay.
So now what we want to do is we want to set that the thing we actually want to click on, maybe we want to click on the actual images there, the little folder images. Mm-hmm. So let's look down and see if we have any folder images. I think we do.
Okay, so here's folder.gif image.
Okay, so we want to do two things here. We want to give it an ID, maybe like story1, and we also want to set its class equal to outline because we have a document on click handler that's set up in that script block for outline.js, and it's looking for a click event on something with a class set equal to outline. So we set the class equal to outline. And remember that class names are always case sensitive, so you need to make sure that you type them correctly.
Okay, so I got this is story1, and then I want to take and then assign the underlying paragraph to be story1 child.
Exactly.
So that it knows how to relate.
Exactly.
Okay, so now, again, since I want to do on the innermost stuff, because otherwise it wouldn't trap it. No, this is the same way, is it?
This is a little bit different. So in this case, we have a paragraph with a font inside. So if we made the paragraph be display none, it would kind of collapse up. There wouldn't be a lot of white space. If we make the font go away, the font would go away, but there'd be a little bit of extra space in the paragraph. So maybe the right place to put it is
on the innermost tag, but not because from the event bubbling standpoint.
Right, exactly.
Just so you're controlling the outline.
So we'll set the ID. He'll set it to story1 child now, because that's what the naming convention here, story1 child, that just happens to be the way that we wrote the script. Mm-hmm. So the other thing that we probably want to do is have it be by default collapsed, so set it to display none by default.
So user is just seeing the headlines.
Exactly. So the only two valid values for display are actually none and quote quote. We don't support block or inline as valid values for display. So make sure that if you're using display none, don't use display block, because in IE5, when we support it, your pages might look a little bit different than what you wanted. So use display none and display quote quote as the valid values. So there we've set it to display none. So let's actually check this out and see if it works. There we go. So the line initially disappears. We click on the story. We click, and we have blink.
We do. Blink in a whole paragraph.
So, and notice how the document is reflowing automatically just by setting some styles. This isn't a 2D position page. This is simply setting some elements to be invisible or visible, and it works great. So why don't we go ahead and add it to the rest of the page to finish the job so I can get paid from my friend for this. Oops. So we'll copy it out, and Robert, what he's going to do is he's going to use the dreaded cut and paste technique, making sure that all the names are unique. Now remember that IDs are unique on the document. So we want to make sure that all the IDs are actually different. So story 1, story 2, story 3, story 4, not all having the same, because if we had them all be the same, it might not work. So he's adding number 4. He's about, nope, that's it, 4. OK, so now we're going to go and we're going to cut out story 1 child and that display none and actually add that to all the font tags. Oops.
Control V.
Very good. OK. So now we're adding in. Oh, we probably wanted to change those names too.
Oh, that's right.
Ooh, he was not having unique names. That was not going to work. So that's story 3, actually.
And this would be story 4. And we have to go back and.
So, Jeopardy music from the band? No. OK. Story 2, OK. Looks like all of our things match. OK. Be first time good. Good thing we had that code review going on here. OK. Everything goes away. Click. Click. Excellent. So we have dynamic HTML on the Amalgamated Widget Corporation homepage. Now notice that we didn't have to write any script at all. We just set some names and IDs on the page. So this makes it very easy for you folks who have engineering shops where they build little scriptlets on the page. Have your design folks include those scriptlets in simply by setting some names and using classes. You get all the benefit of dynamic HTML without writing a single line of script in the page. So we have one more thing we want to have the page do, because we mentioned before that we want to have our pages be discoverable. So as we mouse over something that should be clicked on, we want to set the cursor. So we'll notice that as we mouse over the little anchors, the little images on the page, we actually see just the plain old arrow. So we actually want to set that to cursor.
Okay.
So we can go back to the source, and we'll note that all of the images actually are currently set to class outline. So we can take advantage of that and set a style sheet on class outline, build a class up at the top, in the head, as we put the style block. Remember, style blocks only go in the head of the document. So right now, Robert's creating a class called outline, and he's going to set the cursor attribute to hand because we want to have the hand. We could also set it to one of the 16, move, help. We've gone through this list. You already know it. I don't need to tell you again. So there we go. Now we have the hand on all the images on the page. Pretty simple.
Very simple.
OK, my friend's going to be really happy.
Do I get a cut?
I don't know. We'll see. OK. So we've seen how easy it is to put dynamic HTML on your page. So we've talked about essentially 3 out of the 4 of the big dynamic HTML features at this point. We've talked about dynamic styles. We've talked about dynamic content. We've talked about dynamic positioning. What we really haven't talked about yet is data binding. Right? Data binding is a very easy way to get data from a database or from a flat text file or from wherever into your page. Think about it like dynamic content, but the source of the content is actually a data source. So here we're going to go to my least favorite page, unfortunately, the page that has all my open bugs. So
well, you do only have 4, though. So.
It's not that bad, I guess.
OK.
OK, so we have a simple table and some stuff in it. So let's actually take a look at the source for this page. So this page is using data binding in IE4. And what we have up top is our data source object. The data source object can be one of a many number of different things, including the active data connector, or in this case, our simple tabular data source object, available in IE4 and also available on our web gallery. So this is going after a flat text file of information. Now, note down here that it's initially setting up to say, oh, filter. So I only want to see or only show the rows where the assigned property is equal to mwallet. So it's only showing me my bugs.
And so during the time it's pulling the data from the server, it's going to use this filter at that time to pull that data across.
So what we have here is we have a simple table. And on the table, the way that we've told it to be data bound is we've set the data source attribute, one of the 7 attributes that I told you about required in dynamic HTML now. We've set it equal to bugs. Bugs is the ID of the data source object. It's saying this table should get its information from the bugs data source object. So then what we have is we have a header on our table. And then down below, we have essentially a templated table row. So what this says is this is a row in the table. For every record in the data set, repeat this row. So this row has a TD, and inside of the TD there's a span, and I'm setting data field on this span to bug. Now what this means is that when you get the record out of the data set, put the value in that column, in the bug column, into the span. Essentially doing inner HTML on the span.
So you're defining one row all by itself.
Yes.
And that same row is going to be duplicated for every single bug that's in the database.
Exactly. So what I'd like to do here, just to show how easy this is actually add a new column. Because one thing that this page didn't have is it didn't have a description. So I'm going to add an element in the head. I'm going to call it description. I spelled that right? And I'm going to add another column in the actual row that's getting the data. And as opposed to getting the data field from title, it's going to get it from description, which is DESC. So let's save this page, refresh, and we'll notice now we get the description column on the page. Very, very simple to add and use data binding to get pages.
Now, the data binding object you're sticking on the page there, is that some special data binding thing that only Microsoft can provide, or what is that exactly?
Well, it's a data source object, and we're using OLEDB actually to make this work. The data source object needs to support either iRowset as its data providing mechanism, or we call OLE-SimpleDB. And OLE-SimpleDB is a very simple spec. It fits on a page. We actually have about 10 different data source objects that do a variety of different things, from a Java data source object to one that goes after stock information, all available on the Microsoft home site, in the web gallery actually, where you can actually pull down different ones. And we actually expect a lot of folks to build their own data source objects that are specialized for different behaviors.
So if somebody had a proprietary database model of some sort, they could actually write their own either in Java or in C or something like that, and actually allow that to grab the data in any fashion they'd want, as long as it supported the special iRowset and other OLEDB functionalities.
Exactly. And the OLE-SimpleDB provider, once again, is very simple. It fits on a page. In fact, the first time we wrote one of these was our simple tabular data that goes after the flat text file. An intern wrote it for us in a weekend, so it's not something that's super complicated to do. No offense to the intern, but it wasn't super complicated. So, yeah, he doesn't work here anymore. So what I wanted to do here is do something a little more advanced. We saw on that data binding page how it pulled the initial set of data out. There wasn't a single line of script on the page. What I actually wanted to do here is on this page, I wanted to actually kind of monitor my employees' bugs. So what I'm going to do is actually add a filter in here so I can actually dynamically set what filter I want to see, so what data I want to see. Because the cool thing about data binding is once I get the data down onto the client machine, it's not just static HTML, it's dynamic. I can actually get and set filters and sort order and cool stuff like that. So actually what I want to do is first take out this filter setup on my object. So I'm going to get all the information out of the data source object now. And then right below the H2, I'm going to include an input, and this is another typing test, type equals text, ID equals new filter. And then I'm going to put another input, type equals button, value equals query, on click equals, okay, now notice I'm putting in an input. I've actually put in two inputs, and they're not in a form. That's because with dynamic HTML, you might want to use intrinsic controls to really control an application. So you don't need to use intrinsics just to do form updates. You can use intrinsics on your page to really interact and create dynamic HTML pages. So on click for this, I'm going to say, what I want to do is bugs. I'm going to set the filter property of bugs equal to new filter, which was the name of my input field, dot value. So I'm going to get what the text currently typed into the filter is and set the filter of my bugs data source object to be equal to that text. And then once I actually modify the filter properties, or I change the sort order, I need to call a reset method on the bugs data source object to actually tell it that, oh, now you should actually show new information into the page. Put a little break after this, save it, go back, we'll see how good the typing skills were for today. Okay, so we have the query. It shows all the bugs. So let's say I wanted to see all the bugs assigned to me just to prove that it works. So I say assigned equals mwallet. Hit query, and it shows me only my bugs. Right? Now, it hasn't gone back to the server to do this. It simply filtered the data on the client side that it already had and showed me a new view of it.
So setting the filter in the param tag of the object is just specifying what the filter is going to use to bring the initial data across.
Yes.
But then inside of the web page, once the page has come across, resetting that filter to fine-tune that information and calling the reset function is just taking and reapplying that filter to the local data that's been stored.
Exactly, and the data source object is actually smart enough to know when it can't specify that request. Like if you had sub-filtered it down initially and set a new filter value, it would probably go back to the server to get the new information that you didn't have on the client side. So let's say I only wanted to get my bug, so I could say, you know, assigned equals mwallet and sev equals 1, hit query, and I can do complex things as well. This is a very simple chunk of code. I think that was, what, 8 bytes of code? Pretty simple, and you have this power with dynamic HTML.
Now, if the data source object also supported a sort order or something like that, I could even take and make each one of the column heads be a click event, and when I clicked on one of the column heads, it would resort the data based upon that information.
That would be a great thing for you to do.
Hey, or someone from our audience.
Exactly. So we've seen just about all there is to see now, right? There's one more thing I just want to show you, and Joe kind of stole my thunder a bit, but hey, that's okay. So this is actually asteroids, and let's actually play that.
Now, how exactly does this relate to dynamic HTML? I mean,
well, it is dynamic HTML.
Meaning what?
Well, whoa! Oh. I didn't have that no death function on. Actually, this is pure dynamic HTML. The rocks flying that are about to hit me, died again, are actually just images that I'm animating on the screen using a window.setTimeout loop. The score up at the top is a table where I'm using dynamic content to update the score. The little ships are images that I almost died again, are just images that I'm turning their visibility on and off. The missiles are just images that I'm animating across the screen, and I'm using some native hit testing functionality of the browser using the element from point method to find out if I'm hitting things. This is all just HTML. This is 1,000 lines of JavaScript code. This is 20K, including all the images. It's available on the Microsoft website. You can play with it. You can make your boss angry that we did this.
So in other words, you could take and download this code and work very, very carefully with it as research in learning dynamic HTML.
Exactly. There's a lot of great dynamic HTML coding examples in here that you might want to use and see how they behave under dynamic circumstances.
I can dig it. I think I'm going to write Robotron.
Excellent. So, well, I'm gonna play a little bit more and see see how we're doing.
Actually, before I let you get back to your game, one of the things we did on our website when we asked people to come to this show is ask them to send some email. Now, Joe already covered one of the pieces of email of his talk, and I have a piece of email that I think is probably pretty well answered by you. This is from Joe Temporal, and he asks various things, but one of the things he specifically says is, will any of these enhancements to IE4 ever be recognized through the W3C organization so the standard can be created?
So, in fact, that's a really good question. So it's important to note that out of the major features in dynamic HTML, dynamic styles, dynamic content, dynamic positioning, and data binding, only 2 of them require new attributes, dynamic positioning and data binding. The CSSP draft defines how we do 2D positioning. And there's actually some working group work going on right now to define the new data binding attributes and to make sure that those are standards friendly. So those are in fact very standards friendly. Now, but the thing we really focused on today was on the scripting side. And in fact, for the first time, there is an effort underway to standardize how people script to pages. This has not been something that was ever covered before. The W3C did a really good job defining what HTML and CSS were, but they didn't cover at all what the window object was, or what the document object was, or how to handle events. So there's actually an effort underway right now called the Document Object Model Working Group, and they've actually gone through and done a requirements document. And we're working very closely with them in Netscape to develop a document object model that's very powerful, that allows all access to elements, access to all the attributes, that reflows the document dynamically, all those sorts of things. And we're working very closely with the Standards Committee to make sure that the DOM working group is successful and that IE4 fully implements that.
And so the base idea there is just to make sure that asteroids works everywhere, right?
We want asteroids to work everywhere.
Okay. Well, thanks a lot, Michael. I'll let you get back to your game and work on your high score.
Great. Thanks.
Now, let's take another look at another in the spotlight shot. This one is from Wired Digital and their experiences about designing great websites using IE4. Let's take a look.
Excited, enervated, confused.
The premise of LiveWired is 20 seconds into the future.
Mind-shaking, eye-popping, interactive environment.
The streaming of super graphics in a way that I think is going to be transforming the way that we think of our space and also the way that we think of our computers.
Wired has been trying to get this type of experience for a long time, and this is really the first time that we've been able to launch it and maintain something like this. We want to provide you with an experience. We want to find how we can give you something that's a little bit more overwhelming than, say, looking at a little rectangle among a bunch of other rectangles sitting on your page.
I remember when our developer relations group representative from Microsoft came in and thought he might give us a demo of what Internet Explorer 4 would be able to do. We actually threw him a copy of Mind Grenades, which was a book collecting all of our wired intro art and special ink and special paper in a giant size, and said, can you make the web do this? We've used every advanced effect, every filter, every trick of combining all the heavyweight graphics we can in order to take up the entire screen and give people something that's going to impact them in a way that they didn't think was possible on the web.
Eric's always pushing the boundaries. Every time we give him here's what you can do in IE4 is well, why can't we do this?
For once, what you get when you engage into your desktop is a full screen experience, and something that is really dynamic and something that is also very visually stimulating.
With this browser, I can do more with less, but since I can also push it out, I can send you over more. So it's this gigantic exponential build of what I can show you or what kind of experience I can give you.
We have the opportunity to edit in our favorite tools, Emacs, BBEdit, VI. Those are our kind of authoring tools here. And get our hands on the document through the document object model. Treat it programmatically.
The inner and outer HTML is just my favorite part of the object model. When everything was working as a controller or a plugin, it was very cerebral. You treated it as an engineer would treat it. But when you're using it in CSS, I mean, you're already you're thinking about the layout, and you're saying, oh, I want this blue, and then I want this to glow, and I want to move this, and let's chroma key it off, and let's flip it back and forth on the mask and everything. And that's where you can start playing with it rather than thinking about it. Well, we need to have it move here until the cosine is greater than. No, you want to get in there. You want to say the left is this. You want to change it to blue. You want to put a drop shadow on it, and you want to do it very, very tactile.
Just because you can make your letters be on fire, or that you can pulsate images at people faster than they can possibly keep up with them, that doesn't mean that they're going to like it or they're going to understand what you're doing. So we've had to do a lot of paring down to start with something consistent, recognizable, producible, building a language, as it were, that people will look at the screen and say, oh, this is live wired.
If someone's just starting out learning how to do a channel or any kind of dynamic HTML, CSS is probably the first place they should start. Unlearn using HTML to do the layout. Stop putting in extra tags and express it with CSS. And then once you're done there, you'll know a lot more about how to start in making everything move and going through the document object model.
The biggest part of it is figuring out what do people like, what do people respond to, and how do you communicate with them in a way that they understand. That's exactly what we're trying to do with LiveWired. It's an ongoing experiment.
We'll start and we'll push in and say, oh, there's some walls. And we're oh, wait a minute, it opens out on this way. So we'll walk down there and oh, okay, oh, there's still some more space to go, and we'll keep moving forward. And we haven't found that back wall yet, but our goal is to is to find it.
Well, I hope you paid attention to that shot, because there's some really important information there that I want to take and just make sure they drove home. And that is, just because you can make something happen with dynamic HTML doesn't mean your users are going to like it. So everything we're showing you today, there's a lot of functionality, a lot of capabilities here. Please, don't go overboard. Now, to help us think about some of these design aspects and the ability to making web pages that actually work well and work in a way that the users can appreciate and understand, is a designer from inside Microsoft working for the Developer Relations Group, Nadja Vol-Oaks. So you've been working fairly closely with other website designers that have been working on websites using IE4 channels, dynamic HTML, and stuff like that. What sort of feedback are you getting from them?
A lot of feedback is related to the pre-design and how the information is being formulated from the onset of gathering the information all the way through the storyboarding and then bringing it to fruition and actually seeing all the dynamic aspects coming together. I think that, first of all, let's take a look at kind of go back to Michael's company, his favorite company, and look through the process of how you and him got it to a dynamic level, and then take it a couple steps further and look at some of the aspects of how designers are enhancing their pages and some of the issues that they're dealing with as they're moving forward with dynamic information.
Now, are you saying you don't like this page that Michael and I did up?
Well, I think here's the page that you started out with, and then you guys took it to this level where you started, you added some mouse overs, which are pretty cool, and then you added some expandable, collapsible folders.
I spent some time on that,
I know, I know. It's getting a little closer to a finished product, but it needs a couple more things, couple more design issues dealt with in terms of taking it to the final piece. So let's move on, and we'll talk about how one of the things that you can think about in your design is color, and talking about the hexadecimal values that you can deal with in the palettes, and actually enhancing just the page. I mean, here's your page that you guys worked on, and all we did was add some simple color enhancements to the page. We added some different effects to the mouse overs. It's a very simple thing you can add to your pages, and it across the board will work very well.
Yeah, the mouse over is a little bit more on the subtle side, but still it takes and bounces out enough the user so they know what's going on.
Exactly. You can do a little bit different type treatments. Just with typography and color, you can just simply very easily enhance a page. Then you might want to take it one step further. In terms of adding a couple images to your pages, you want to keep the page still very lightweight, but you may want to add simple, like for example in this case, we just added a simple graphic for the company's logo. And we added an animated GIF to give it a little motion, additional motion on the page. And then you'll notice with the type, we did a kind of a different treatment to the typography on the page. We actually applied a glow filter to some of the typographical elements, like the titles of the different areas. So being able to pop some of your elements off the page using the filters is a very effective way to enhance
So that amalgamated widget title across the top, that's text, but it's using the glow filter, similar to the alpha filter we saw earlier, just to apply that white glow to it.
Right, so it doesn't need to be a heavy graphic. It can just be a very lightweight, just HTML text. Another thing that you can do inside of these expandable areas is you can have images. I mean, you can enhance the typography. You can play with that area and leverage that space that's kind of hidden away. Then you can make images visible very easily.
So now in dealing with some of these designers, you know, and once you've taken a page from a static page like the amalgamated widgets page and are moving it further along, do designers have kind of a methodology they use that they're thinking through to try to design a great web page?
I think, yes, they all have a different approach of how they're actually pulling these channels together. In one particular case, Microgroove worked on the Rolling Stone channel, and they decided to, because they had such a short amount of time to do this channel, they had to come up with an organization of information in a very rapid way. And their designers basically broke down the hierarchy of the channel, the basic 4 areas of the channel, and how the site would flow. So it's kind of pulling the information together and then organizing it in an architecture like we see here, where we have the 4 main areas outlined. It's just a tree structure of their site and their information. Helps them bring the content into that dynamic space. If you take a look at how they brought the site to the final design, or this channel, they actually incorporated their 4 main areas with mouse over effects and different typographical treatments within the revealing areas. They also added just a simple thing that what looks like an animated GIF, but it is actually a structured graphic that's being warped over time, or warped with the dynamic aspects of the vectors and the primitives of this graphic. It's very lightweight. That's actually just drawn on the page.
So it's just a vector graphic image.
Exactly. This is another approach. Some people are, because there's a lot of motion and information that has to kind of go in segments or little produced pieces in a channel environment, a lot of people are doing storyboarding, and a lot of people are sketching their storyboards out, they're drawing them on whiteboards, they're playing in other products to get the concept of motion and how to bring all this information together into a nice piece. This is an example of the USA Today's preview of their channel, and they just really, rough, just sketched out exactly how the information was going to flow from the off-screen environment into this playing area, this full-screen area. So you see the motion of various elements coming into the page, images moving in from areas. They basically diagram their whole entire piece, and then they bring it to the final piece through their HTML development environment. So here we have what we saw just sketched out, coming to life and coming together to form their final piece.
So storyboarding much the same way you'd storyboard like a movie or a play or something like that?
It's very similar, even CD-ROM titles, interactive television pieces. It's just a way of bringing that information together, and kind of the whole design process is so iterative. It's a way to capture that and kind of come to some final decisions on how this dynamic stuff will work.
Okay. Now I know that Internet Explorer is taking and adding some methods that you can use to actually view the data and the immersive experiences and the channels and stuff like that. Do any of these new aspects, do they cause both new problems as well as new solutions for dealing with some of the navigational issues that people are having to deal with?
Yes, it does. It actually opens up kind of more decisions for designers. They have to decide on multiple different ways of how people will navigate their information. Not only do they have to decide the linear navigation, they have to decide how they're going to access different areas of their site, or their channels, or their sites at different times.
Because maybe like the back button may not always be available because
exactly,
the
because the full screen mode you want to, it's almost like a CD-ROM where the user has to have a custom navigation that they can rely on to get them to all locations or at any location at any time. The actual user interface of IE4 does allow us to navigate kind of a site map, if you will, of a channel. The site map is kind of the little door that opens up on the side, and that shows and reveals the areas of the site if the designer so chooses, or it can highlight new stories or new articles of the day. It's a good place to leverage current information and basically key location areas of your channel. And then in the lower area or somewhere within your channel itself, you need to come up with a navigation metaphor, or a way to navigate, or a way for your users to get through your site. The Epicurious channel does, I think, a really wonderful job with custom navigation, of being able to have the user navigate through their channel. They've provided you with a very nice and subtle navigation metaphor that is on a click event, so you just click on the navigation metaphor and you activate this cafeteria tray, kind of fun, kitschy kind of way of navigating their information. And they actually give you an option to stop it too. So it's like, okay, you know, there's so much motion going on here, we want to at least be able to stop something at some point or another. So this is really nice to be able to have it shut off and shut on the user's demand. Up at the top, they have like mini shows going on for each of their areas of their site. So you can actually understand on a daily basis what each show or what each segment is going to be providing you with. And then they really do a cute little navigation animated GIF to get you to their next area. This channel takes a whole different approach about how they design their navigation system. This is the trip channel, and I think it's fabulous. What they've done here is they've actually designed their whole navigation metaphor on circles. So it's not boxes, it's not clunky, it's very elegant, and you just flow right through their areas of their channel. They use a lot of the features that you and Michael were talking about, the mouse overs, the scaling of type, the visibility features, all of that is represented here in this particular piece. But it's very elegant, it's crisp, it's clean, and it gives you nice a locator type system up in the left-hand corner to get to various areas. It's very fun to use.
It makes the user feel like they're actually participating with the website.
Exactly, and then that the content is changing too, and being able to see that on a daily basis is really fun in that type of a navigation system.
Now, myself, I'm really into kind of the low-weight websites and not having a lot of images and graphics and stuff like that on it too. And now I found that using cascading style sheets, I can get a lot of functionality out of fonts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, using them with different styles or color or stuff like that, or adding some shadow effects to it. How can we take and leverage that even further with IE4 to assist people doing font things on their websites?
Well, with style sheets, you're able to do a lot of the basic formatting and layout of your design of your pages. As you see here, we've got all of the features flowing across the page. And I think in IE4, because style sheets have been implemented to their fullest, basically fullest effect, you can do a lot more things. A lot of the specification is now there, so you're much richer. You have a much broader range of ways you can design with your type and with your images and any element basically on the page. These are just some of the features that we know that we're familiar with style sheets, being able to do colored backgrounds and textures and dealing with colors in hexadecimal values. One of the new features in IE4 is is being able to do an overline. Maybe you want to use that for something, but you can use underlines for your hyperlinking or lines through, and now overline.
They didn't use underline and overline together for that effect on the amalgamated widgets page?
Exactly. For those mouse over effects, I kind of blocked off the areas with an overline and an underline simultaneously. So combining them together is a nice thing to do as well. Margins, just being able to talk about margins. A lot of this is just desktop publishing meets the web and being able to format your information in a very refined way. Text indenting paragraphs is very a nice thing to be able to do. Adjusting the distance between your lines of type, being able to set basically almost like spacing and spreading the information out. Wider letters, this is a new part of IE4, so being able to spread your letters apart with letter spacing. And also being able to do initial caps, so being able to accent various key letters in your information as well is very interesting. Now, I think one of the most exciting things in IE4.0 for me that has come about is this whole thing with the filters. And I know you and Michael spent some time going over filters and how they work, and you saw an alpha filter fading in and out. Well, let's take a look at how easy it is to just add a simple filter to this page. This page just illustrates two fonts. It's using Mistral on the top for the words, and then it's using WebDings, which is a free Microsoft font that is distributed with IE4.0, and it's also you can download it off the Microsoft typography site. It's a fun, really exciting illustrative font to play with for your pages. I'm going to go ahead and view source, and I'm going to add, just really quickly add, I already have a style block for the page, so I'm just going to work inside my style block and play with the elements I already have on the page and add a glow filter to a couple of the elements and a drop shadow to the snow border on the page. So all I need to do is just basically start out with defining which elements I want to add these filters to. And I've already given each of them down below an ID. So every element has to kind of have a common name. It's like you need to give a name, as you name your children, you have to give something a name to be able to call it something. So I named these three elements type, rider, and then I named it ridges. So I have three elements, and up in my style block, I'm now going to talk to those and apply a filter to them. So it's really easy to do this. All I need to do is type pound, which means I'm talking to the ID of the element that I've given it. And then I'm going to type the name of the element. So type is one of them. The third one is, or the second one, is ridges. And then the next one is rider. So we have our three elements. Now we want to add some filters to those. So I'm going to go ahead and put in my style information for those. And what I want to start out with is doing filter, colon, and then I'm going to add to the type a glow. Put those in brackets. And now, because each of these filters have properties, and you can actually change different variations of the glow. For example, I can change the color. So I'm going to say color equals, and I'm going to go ahead and just type in black. So you can use any color here.
So we can use either the named colors or the hexadecimal value.
Or hexadecimal, exactly. And then comma, and now I want to define the strength of the glow, like how wide is this glow going to be off of the element itself. So I can just type in strength. It's just very easy, and then so I define that to be 5, and it's just default to pixels. So now let's say we want to add a filter to the same filter, the exact same filter. I can just cut and paste that. Just copy this whole line here. Finish off our bracket. Copy this whole line. And we'll go ahead and put that onto the ridges. So I'm just reusing the same glow for the same thing. And now I'm going to put one more filter, and that's going to be filter, colon, drop shadow. So this is the easiest way to get a drop shadow now. It's so easy. And I'm going to say the color of the drop shadow equals black, same color, and comma, and then I'm going to say, because of a drop shadow, you have to define the position of it. Is it offset to the X area or to the Y area? So you have to say, I'm going to offset this, not offset. Off in the Y equals, let's just do 5, and then off in the X equals 5. And then we close off our bracket, and we're done. And then all we need to do is just tab over. I've already saved this file out, so we can just click on it, and voila, we have the glow on the type, and we have a drop shadow on the snow border, and we have glow in the mountains. It's so easy, and it's so fun, and these filters there's a number of them to play with, and you can add them to type. And you can add them to images as well. In this particular sample, it is illustrating a couple things. One, it's showing that you have the transition at the top. So you see that same alpha that you guys were doing on the type. You see that happening here with two images coming together. And then below, you see a filter applied to a JPEG that's being manipulated over time. So the phase of this wave of the water is actually being manipulated over time.
So it's not an animated GIF?
No, it's not an animated GIF. It's an actual element that's being, has a filter applied to it, and then it's dynamically being changed over time. So that's wonderful. You can also chain these filters together. So I could have a drop shadow and a glow and then have it pulsating, the glow pulsating, or a lot of combinations of these filters together work really well and can get some really interesting effects. Another thing that I think designers will really start to leverage in their web design or in their channel designs, for that matter, is being able to distribute their fonts with their web pages. A lot in the history, we've all been, with the web, we've just been stuck with what is it, Helvetica and Arial and Times New Roman. So
Geneva and Chicago.
Geneva, it's like all these fonts that are like very limiting. We're not pretty much guaranteed that there's only going to be these, 3 fonts on all these systems. So there's a lot of effort going on to be able to, and development going on to be able to distribute fonts with your web pages as well, and that's called font embedding. Being able to distribute these objects or subsets of fonts with your web pages. You may wonder why you'd want to do that. One, if you have a specific font that you use for your logo, for your company, or if you have a specific design that you have in mind that uses a font that you know not everyone's going to have on their machines, that would be one case you'd want to use font embedding. For example, this page is for a cooking company, and they've got basically a bunch of different type going on here, but you're not guaranteed that those fonts are going to be on the machine. So the designer of this page, Simon, decided to use and implement font embedding for this page. So we've got these graphics on the left-hand side, all being generated through type that's being delivered with the page at the same time. Here's another page that uses a French script font. It's an illustrative font. It's a beautiful piece. It's a very simple, lightweight piece. It uses a couple ding blots or wing blots on the page to give you some graphical pieces and elements to the design. This page, font embedding as well. You'd want to send these fonts along with the page because this whole entire page is done with pure typography. So being able to deliver these lightweight pages with a small subset or just these letters that I'm using with the page is very important.
And so all these fonts are being downloaded to the user's system because the author of the website attached a modified version of the font file to his website in some fashion?
Let's take a look at that. It's basically what's happening is, yes, it's referencing a file that's being sent with the page, and the page is being downloaded at the same time into this machine. This is a page we were working on earlier, and like I said, it used a couple of fonts. We've got WebDings, which is going to be in your machine pretty much if you've installed IE4 or you've downloaded it off the typography site. But we have another font that's not necessarily on all systems. This is a Mistral font. And I would probably say that I would want to embed that font or make this a graphic, but I think we should embed the font because it'll just make the page a lot lighter, and I'm guaranteed to have that.
But this page isn't using a lot of letters from that font. I mean, so why?
No, it's only using a few. You don't need to download the whole font. It's only using a few of those letters from that font. So let's go ahead and go to our handy tool. This is the WEF tool, and this is there's a reference on everyone's CD to how to use this tool and where to get this tool from the Microsoft Typography Group site. And basically what they did was they made this tool so that designers and people that want to deliver font objects with their pages can basically have this tool create the subset of font, the subset of the font that they want to use, and also analyze their page and decide how many fonts are being used on the page. For example, in this case, I have a link. I've already opened a project that I'm working on, that file we just looked at. And we have a hierarchy of where the file is located, so it analyzes that. I've already told it to analyze my page, so it knows, for example, here in this window here, after it was analyzed, that it has 2 fonts that are being used. They're okay to embed. So that
by that you mean what?
Basically, there's different levels of embeddability for a font. As a font designer, I'm very conscientious of how I want my font delivered. I'm making a living off of these fonts, so I want to be conscientious of how my font is distributed, or even maybe I don't want it distributed at all. So I can make the choice of defining if my font is embeddable or not in various levels. So this tool recognizes that and knows if that font has been approved to embed or if it's has a certain issue about if it's embeddable or not. Then it decides how many individual glyphs or letters I'm using for that particular page, or multiple pages. In this case, it's a single page. So I'm using 12 characters from the font Mistral and 3 from the WebDings font, and it says yes to embed. So I've gone ahead and just, in essence of time, already saved a page out that the same page that we just looked at that already has the font embedding information in it. The tool, what it did for me was, let me show you really quick. Let me go back. Actually, I think I just missed my page. So we'll just skip on that page there, because I think I clicked too far and I can't get back now. Wonderful way of the web, and my navigation isn't working there. So anyways, basically what happens is the tool spits out the EOT file, the embeddable OpenType file, and then inside my style block it includes the style information for the page. It includes an @fontface tag, or a feature, which is part of the style block. It includes the weight of the font, the style of the font, and also the URL of the location of where that EOT font file is located as well.
And so all that's automatically stuck into your page using style sheet information to attach it properly. So all you have to do in your font tag is just reference the font by name, and it automatically pulls it across.
Exactly.
Now, on this particular page, you were using both Minstrel and WebDings. Now, since WebDings is part of IE4, you know that that font's going to be there. Does the WEF2 allow you to take and say, create an embedding for this font, but not for this font?
Yes, it does. You can say, I want some of these fonts embedded or not. So yes, it's very easy to fix that as well.
And so that way also, if you had a page using an awful lot of text, and you say, well, gee, I might really like this font to be there, but I don't need it to be there, but maybe there's some individual items, like on that one with the wind blots or whatever, that had a lot of text. Rather than downloading the entire file, which might be kind of large sometimes, you only have individual bits.
Yeah, exactly. The optimized size or the subset is a much easier way, or the smallest file that you can send across is the most leveraged way of doing font embedding.
Okay, and so a pointer to this tool is on all the CDs everyone has, and the application is downloadable from the Microsoft website, and it's freely downloadable.
Yes.
And so they can download it now and actually use it and see how well this works.
Yes, and actually one other thing to note that's very important is the font at this point is supporting the TrueType file format for fonts. It's also going to, in its final release, work with OpenType and Type 1 fonts as well. So it's an all-encompassing tool that will support font embedding for all types of fonts.
Oh, great. That sounds really exciting, because, I mean, as a website author, I know dealing with fonts and trying to figure out, gee, do I make this a graphic, or do I take and put it as a font, or do I choose a different font just because it might not be in everybody else's site?
Right.
That's always a problem people have to deal with.
It really opens the doors for designers in terms of what type of typography and treatments they want to deal with on the web today.
Yeah. To the designers in our audience, do you have any like closing remarks you want to make sure they remember as they're designing websites that focus on IE4 using dynamic HTML?
I think probably one of the most beneficial things to remember and to keep in mind is when you start out on these projects and you have all these interactive ideas and concepts, and you can visualize that you have transitions and filters and all this dynamic information, that you need to keep that to a minimum and be really smart about how you use your dynamic information. Design really easy to navigate information. Don't give your designer or give your audience or your users too many choices. I think the web is just way too loaded with too many choices, and I think that if you can keep your choices to a minimum, you'll be much more successful in bringing information to your end user. And I think the last thing is just that there are a lot of new things about dynamic HTML, and you should kind of gather those up, look at all the filters, look at the transitions, really understand what it means to move things around, and just basically put that into your toolbox and start designing and using that stuff to create some really interesting content with your teams.
As long as you do it judiciously, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should.
Exactly.
Well, thanks a lot, Nadja. I'm sure our designers appreciated hearing about some of these ideas, learning about font embedding, and some of the other capabilities that dynamic HTML brings to the table for them to use.
Great. Thank you, Robert.
You're welcome. Now that we've dealt pretty tightly with some of the dynamic HTML and some of the design aspects, I'm sure a lot of you guys have your heads ready to explode. And so let's take a quick 20-minute break and be back in here after that, and we'll continue on with the rest of the show.